This is part 57 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss Razor View syntax. We know that in a Razor View, both C# code and HTML can coexist. To switch between HTML and C# code, we use @ symbol. Let's say, for example, I want to print numbers from 1 to 10. We can very easily achieve that using a for loop. Okay, so this for loop here is C# code. So we are preceding that with an @ symbol. Okay, so this for loop, opening bracket, closing bracket, this is C# code, and we want each number to be in bold. Okay, so we are wrapping that with a bold tag. So here from C# we are switching to HTML mode. The moment Razor View detects this bold tag, it knows that okay, it's an HTML tag, so it is smart enough to switch to HTML mode. But then after that, we want to print number, whatever value this I variable is carrying. Okay, so we need to switch from HTML to C# mode, and to do that we are preceding that variable I, which is C# variable, with an @ symbol. So we are switching from HTML to C# using that @ symbol, and then we are closing the bold tag. So we are again switching from C# to HTML mode. Okay, basically to switch between C# code and HTML, we use @ symbol in Razor Views. Let's look at this program in action. So this is the index view. So we want a for loop, so we are preceding that with an @ symbol. For int I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. Okay, so all this is C# code. Now I want to print, whatever value that is there in I can simply say @I. Okay, let's save that and let's refresh this index view. So we should have 1 to 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now let's say I want each number to be bolded. Then we can wrap that inside a bold tag. Okay, now let's go ahead and refresh that. Every number should be bolded. Okay, there we go. Now what happens if I don't use that @ symbol? If we don't use that @ symbol, then Razor View treats that as literal text as I, and it simply prints I 10 times. So if you want to pull out the value from the C# variable, then you have to switch to C# mode, and you do that by using the @ symbol. Alright. And there may be scenarios where we have to define some variables and perform some calculations, and that's a perfect scenario for defining a code block. Okay, and to define a code block, we use @ symbol, opening bracket, closing bracket, and within that block, whatever code that you write is going to be C# code. So here notice that we are defining two variables, which are going to hold the sum of even numbers and odd numbers. And then we have a for each loop, and we are checking if that number is divisible by 2. We know that if it's divisible by 2, it's an even number. So in which case, we are adding all the even numbers. If it is not divisible by 2, in the sense if the remainder is not 0, then we know it's an odd number, in which case we are computing the sum of all odd numbers. So basically this little bit of C# code that we have here is computing the sum of even and odd numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so to compute that, we have to define two variables which are going to hold that sum, and then we have to write bit of logic. So here everything is going to be C# code. Okay, so this is a perfect scenario to use a code block. Okay, and how do we define a code block? Using @ symbol, opening bracket, and closing bracket. Okay, let's look at this in action. So we use an @ symbol, opening bracket, and a closing bracket. Let's define the variables that we need. So we want an integer variable, and let's call it sum of even numbers, and we want to initialize that to 0. And we want another variable, and let's call it sum of odd numbers, and let's initialize that to 0 as well. Now let's use a for loop, and notice that I don't have to use an @ symbol now every time I have to write C# code, because we are inside a code block. So everything that we are going to write here will be treated as C# code. So let's create a variable I. For int I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. So we are going to loop through 1 to 10, and if I mod 2 is 0, so if the remainder is 0, then we know that it is an even number, else we know that it is an odd number. If it's an even number, then we have to sum, even numbers, we have to total them. So sum of even numbers is equal to sum of even numbers plus I. Similarly, if it's going to be an odd number, then it's going to be sum of odd numbers is equal to sum of odd numbers plus I. Okay, so we have defined two variables here, and we have performed whatever calculations that we have to perform, and now it is time to print the values that we have stored in these variables. So I want to print the sum of even numbers and odd numbers, and let's print them using maybe an h3 tag. So sum of even numbers is equal to, so we have to pull the value out of this variable. So we have to flip now to C# mode, and to do that we can use the add symbol. So add sum of even numbers. Similarly, we want to print the sum of odd numbers, and let's use sum of odd numbers variable. That's it. Let's save everything and let's refresh this view. So now we should see sum of even numbers and sum of odd numbers. So we need to change that text right here. It has to be sum of odd numbers. Save it, refresh your view, and we should get sum of odd numbers there. Alright. Now, there may be scenarios where we have to switch between code and literal text. Let's actually understand that with an example. Let's say we are printing numbers 1 to 10, but at the same time, while we are printing those numbers, we also want to print this literal text specifying whether it's an even number or an odd number. So 1 is an odd number, so we have to print it like this: 1 is odd, 2 even, 3 odd. So we want to print it like this. So basically, to achieve that, we are using a for loop here. So we are looping through from 1 to 10. Okay, and then we want to print that number first. Okay, whatever number that we have in that variable, in that C# variable. So we are printing that, and we want that to be bolded. So we are wrapping that inside a bold tag. Okay, and then if the number is divisible by 2, okay, then we know it's an even number. Okay, and then you see that there I am using text element. What happens if I don't use text element? If I don't use text element, then whatever I'm going to type within this opening and closing bracket, it's going to treat that as C# code. Okay, so I have to tell somehow to the Razor view, okay, now I simply want to print this literal text here. Okay, so that's why we're using this text element there. Similarly, here we are again using text element for specifying that as an odd number. Now we can either achieve that using this text element, or we can use the syntax at colon. Okay, so basically to switch between C# code and literal text, we can use either text element or at colon syntax. Let's actually look at that in action. So at for int I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. Okay, so we want to print the value that is in I, but we want to bold that. So let's go ahead and use the bold tag. So from HTML we want to switch to C#, so we use the at symbol and we print whatever value that's present in I. And now we are going to do a bit of computation here. So if I mod 2 is equal to 0, so if it's equal to 0, then we know that it's an even number, in which case we want to print a dash and then whether if it is odd number or even number. Now look at this. If I simply say, okay, output dash and then print this text even, look at that. Look at the shade, it's shaded with light gray color. So it is actually treating that as C# code and not as literal text, but our intention here is to treat that as literal text. So if that's our intention, we have to use the text element, and then obviously we have to close that text element. Okay, similarly else, we know that it's going to be an odd number, so again we use the text element and specify that it's an odd number. Let's save everything and let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay, all of them are coming in the same line, so let's include an HTML break and let's refresh that. So we should now get the output that we expect. Okay, so we can either use the text element or we can use @ syntax and then get rid of that. So @ and let's refresh this view. We should get the same output. It's just that we are using a different syntax now. Alright. On this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.